Once upon a time, a king called Gilgamesh lived in the city of Uruk. His mother was a goddess, his father was a man. Thus, Gilgamesh had divine powers, but was not immortal as the pure gods. But nonetheless, Gilgamesh was stronger than any of his citizens and used his power to oppress and humiliate them. One example was when Gilgamesh routinely crashed weddings and stole the bride the first night. But people in Uruk grew tired of their monarch and complained to the gods. The gods eventually listened and created a man strong enough to challenge Gilgamesh. They named him Enkidu, a Mesopotamian Tarzan who lived and ate with the animals. But before Enkidu could go to Uruk and challenge Gilgamesh, he had to become a man. Enkidu eventually met a lady, Shamhat, who took him to the shepherds. The shepherds gave Enkidu bread and beer. Eat bread, Enkidu, the food of the gods. Drink beer, Enkidu, the drink of the gods, Shamhat said. Enkidu ate bread until he was full and drank 7 jars of beer. His face was shining with happiness and he started to sing. Enkidu washed his hairy body, anointed himself with oil, and was turned into a human. And this is so interesting because the act of eating bread and drinking beer was eventually what turned Enkidu into a human. I've been experimenting with brewing Mesopotamian beer for the last 6 months. In the next episode, I will reveal the results and share some recipes if you want to brew Mesopotamian beer yourself. So make sure to subscribe to my channel now so you don't miss out on anything. Anyway, when Enkidu had turned into a human, he finally went to Uruk to challenge Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was striding to the wedding to spend the first night with the bride, as usual. It was his right, or rather the right he had given himself, as the undisputed king of Uruk. The sand-colored cobblestones almost vibrated beneath his steps. As the king swiftly strode along, everyone moved out of the way, as they always did whenever Gilgamesh showed himself, except that is, for a wild man with horns. Enkidu. He was unknown to Gilgamesh and the other inhabitants of Uruk. Enkidu blocked the king's path and did not move an inch. And Gilgamesh was shocked. Nobody had ever blocked Gilgamesh's path, and he punished people for much less. Everyone watching knew that this would escalate any second. Gilgamesh peered into Enkidu's eyes, and without asking for permission, he plunged into him. Violent chaos broke out in the streets of Uruk. Doorsteps trembled, walls shook. No one dared to intervene. Hundreds of soldiers watched as the heroes were fighting, and the fighting went on and on. Neither of them gave way. But eventually, in the heat of the battle, and perhaps because of Enkidu's strength, Gilgamesh calmed down. He hugged the wild man, realizing he had just found his first friend. Enkidu, in the forest lives the warlike Humbaba, Gilgamesh said. Let us travel there and defeat him. My friend, I saw him when I walked with my animals in the mountains. Humbaba's voice is a torrent. His speech is fire. No one can defeat him, Enkidu answered. The king frowned and replied, Why, my friend, do you speak like a coward? You were born and raised with the animals on the steppe. The lions attacked you. The strongest men avoided you. Gilgamesh turned to the crowd around him. Listen to me. I will walk the long way to Humbaba and fight a battle like no other. Give me your blessing before I go. When I return, I will arrange a feast where joy will be plentiful. But Enkidu turned around too and appealed to the city's elders. Tell him not to go to the cedar forest, he insisted. The forest must not be seen by human eyes. The elder stepped forward and spoke as one. You are young, Gilgamesh. You let your emotions guide you. Do not put trust in your strength alone. Gilgamesh ignored them. My friend, come, let us go to Queen Ninsun, he said to Enkidu. She will give us good advice. Ninsun was Gilgamesh's mother, and when she learned what her son was up to, she got worried. Ninsun washed herself, changed clothes, and climbed to the rooftop of her squared house made of clay bricks. There, she offered food to the sun god Shamash and asked him to help Gilgamesh on his journey. The act of making food and drink offerings to the Mesopotamian gods was a common practice. In fact, it was the desire to please the gods with food and drink that developed the Mesopotamian cuisine. Every god in every Mesopotamian city was fed 4 times daily. And as you can imagine, the food and drink that was offered on the table of gods was the most delicious food and drink at the time. Which is why I've decided to make a cookbook, Table of Gods, inspired by the world's oldest recipes written on clay tablets in ancient Mesopotamia 4,000 years ago. If you'd like to try 3 of the recipes from my book, go to tableofgods.com/Gilgamesh. Ninsun hung a chain of symbols around Enkidu's neck and said, "Strong Enkidu, I did not give birth to you, but I take you as my son, and Gilgamesh takes you as his brother." A defining moment for Enkidu, who never had a father, mother, or brother. Gilgamesh and Enkidu said goodbye to their mother and began their journey toward the cedar forest where the monster Humbaba lived. After hiking up mountains and walking for 20 double hours, they stopped to eat bread. Enkidu started complaining. "My friend, my arms are numb. My friend, why do you speak like a coward? Forget death. Together we will achieve eternal fame." The friends continued their journey and didn't stop until they stood at the entrance to the primeval forest. Humbaba's footprints had formed a wide path. The 2 friends entered warily, inhaling the fragrant scent of the cedar trees, whose tall crowns obscured the sunlight. Suddenly, a voice came from the forest.
"Gilgamesh, you fool!"
Gilgamesh and Enkidu drew their weapons. The voice rang out again.
"Enkidu, the fatherless son. When you were little, I saw you, but I let you be. Now you lead Gilgamesh here and stand as an enemy."
Humbaba suddenly emerged. He looked Gilgamesh in the eyes and said,
"Gilgamesh, I will slit your throat and let the eagles eat your flesh."
Gilgamesh froze when he saw Humbaba. "My friend, Humbaba has transformed," Gilgamesh told Enkidu. Enkidu cast him a glance. "My friend, why do you speak like a coward? When the smith pours the glowing ore, can the glow wait? Now the moment of truth has come." Dark clouds circled over the cedar forest. Death was about to rain upon them, and Gilgamesh realized there was no turning back. He plunged toward Humbaba, toward death, and Enkidu followed him like the shaft of an arrow. Suddenly, hurricane-strong winds swept over the cedar forest. It was the sun god Shamash. He responded to Ninsun's prayers. The winds immobilized Humbaba.
"Enkidu,
Humbaba pleaded.
you know my forest, its ways, and all its secrets. Tell Gilgamesh to spare me."
Enkidu turned to Gilgamesh. "My friend, do not listen to Humbaba's pleadings. Kill him. You will obtain eternal fame. You will obtain an eternal name." The rain kept pouring down, and the winds still held Humbaba fast. "Before the supreme Enlil hears, put an end to Humbaba," Enkidu thundered. Gilgamesh swung his axe and forced it through Humbaba's neck, and separated Humbaba's head from his body. Humbaba was dead. The gods held a council. They had created Humbaba to protect the cedar forest, and Humbaba's death was a tragedy. So the gods decided that either Gilgamesh or Enkidu would have to die. The people of Uruk cheered and celebrated as Gilgamesh and Enkidu returned with Humbaba's head. Gilgamesh walked the streets of Uruk with a straight back. His long hair hung on his wide shoulders, and his golden crown shone. His beauty and courage spread all the way to heaven, attracting the goddess of love, Ishtar, also known by her Sumerian name, Inanna. Ishtar descended from the sky and proposed to Gilgamesh, but Gilgamesh was not interested. He arrogantly refused the proposal, which made Ishtar, who was also the goddess of war, furious. She became so upset she decided to kill Gilgamesh. Ishtar left Earth and when she returned to Uruk, an earthquake followed. A chasm opened and 300 people fell in. Ishtar had arrived with the bull of heaven, Gugulana, who was looking for Gilgamesh. Panic spread through the streets, and the inhabitants of Uruk fled for their lives. Gugulana was aggressive. He destroyed everything that came in his way. Enkidu was first to challenge him. He took the bull by his horns and shouted after Gilgamesh, "My friend, stab the bull in the neck!" Enkidu rushed behind the wild bull and grabbed his tail, and as Gugulana turned to crush Enkidu, Gilgamesh jumped onto the bull and thrust his dagger between the horns. Gugulana fell to the warm ground and stopped breathing. Ishtar climbed the wall of Uruk and cried aloud, "Gilgamesh has defiled me and killed the bull of heaven." When Enkidu heard her, he tore off the bull's shoulder and threw it at Ishtar's face. "If I got hold of you, I would do to you as I did to this one. I would hang the bull's intestines over your arms." When everything had settled, the friends took out Gugulana's heart and offered it to Shamash, the sun god who saved them in the battle against Humbaba. In the evening, Gilgamesh did as he promised. He organized a great feast in his palace. And during the feast, Gilgamesh asked the young women, "Who is the most beautiful of all men?" "Gilgamesh is the most beautiful of all men," they answered. Then Gilgamesh asked, "Who is the proudest of all men?" "Enkidu is the proudest of all men," the women answered. After the great feast, Gilgamesh and Enkidu fell asleep. That night, Enkidu had a dream. He awoke in the middle of the night and told Gilgamesh that the great gods had taken counsel. Enkidu explained his dream to Gilgamesh. The sky god Anu spoke to the wind god Enlil and said that since they have killed the bull of heaven, killed Humbaba, and cut down the cedar trees, one of them must die. Gilgamesh's eyes filled with tears. Although he had divine blood, he was not a pure god, and only the pure gods were immortal. "My brother, I will pray to the great gods. I will call upon Shamash. I will pray to Anu and Enlil," Gilgamesh said. "My friend, when Enlil has spoken his word, it does not change. As birds leave the earth, so does the man." The judgment of the gods was inevitable, but it did not fall on Gilgamesh, but on Enkidu, who died 12 days later. Gilgamesh cried until his cheeks were red. He covered his friend like a bride and circled above him like an eagle. "You are silent. You can't hear me. Your heart is no longer beating." Gilgamesh paced back and forth, tore his hair and threw away his jewelry. "Enkidu, my only friend, the panther of the steppe. Together we climbed to the top of the mountains. You were the shield that protected me, the sword at my side." Gilgamesh wandered about in the wasteland and cried out to the gods, "Shall I also die? Am I not like Enkidu?" Enkidu's passing caused Gilgamesh to think about his own death. So he decided to make the long journey to Utnapishtim, the only man who could give him eternal life. Gilgamesh went on a journey away from Uruk again, this time in search of immortality. After wandering for months, killing lions and dressing in their skins, Gilgamesh faced his most difficult challenge, the Mashu Mountain. Scorpion creatures dressed in white mantles guarded the mighty entrance. Gilgamesh froze in fear when he saw them. The Scorpion Man told the Scorpion Woman, "Somebody has arrived. His body is of divine flesh. He is 2/3 god, 1/3 human," the Scorpion Woman replied. "Who are you? Where are you going? Why have you come all this way?" the Scorpion Man asked Gilgamesh. "I am Gilgamesh. My errand is to see Utnapishtim, he who sought and received eternal life." The Scorpion Man recognized Gilgamesh by his name. "That's impossible, Gilgamesh. Nobody has ever passed the Mashu Mountain's narrow passage." But Gilgamesh insisted. He told the Scorpion Man the grief he had been through, and the Scorpion Man sympathized with him. "Go, Gilgamesh. Don't be scared. The Mashu Mountain gives you permission to go, the Scorpion Man said. Gilgamesh walked through a dark tunnel in the mountain pass, and after 12 double hours, he felt the wind in his face. Gilgamesh came out on the other side of the mountain. The rays of the sun lit up the vast ocean below him, and by the seashore, he saw the beautiful beer brewer, Siduri. Gilgamesh went to her. "Brewer, why did you lock the door when you saw me? I will smash it and break open the door lock. I am Gilgamesh, who killed Humbaba." "If you are Gilgamesh, why are you dressed in lion skins? Why do you look like a wanderer? Why is your face so worn with sorrow?" "Why wouldn't my face be worn with sorrow? My friend whom I loved, Enkidu, has become earth again. Am I not like him? Now tell me, brewer, where is the way to Utnapishtim?" "There never was a way, Gilgamesh. Since time immemorial, no one has traveled across the sea with the waters of death. But go to the ferryman Urshunabi. If possible, travel with him. Otherwise, turn back." Gilgamesh found the ferryman Urshunabi and built him a ship. Together, they traveled across the waters of death and came to the end of the world, to Utnapishtim, who was not happy to have visitors. "Why are you prolonging the suffering, Gilgamesh? What have you achieved? You have only filled yourself with sorrow. You have only allowed the last day to come closer. Death is inevitable, for Gilgamesh and for the food. When I look at you, Utnapishtim, I see that you are just like me. Tell me, how did you end up among the gods and receive eternal life?" Utnapishtim told Gilgamesh of the flood that Enlil caused to destroy humanity, and how Utnapishtim, with the help of the god of wisdom, Ea, built an ark that allowed him to survive. A fun fact is that the flood story in the Epic of Gilgamesh is almost identical to the flood story that appears much later in the Old Testament. Gilgamesh felt silent at Utnapishtim's story of the ark, but he didn't accept it as to leave and live a mortal life. So Utnapishtim gave him a chance to get eternal life. Try to stay awake for 7 nights. Gilgamesh was shocked at how easy that challenge was. He sat down with his head on his knees and immediately fell asleep. Look at the young man seeking eternal life. Sleep has fallen upon him like a mist. Wake him up and let him travel back in peace to his people, Utnapishtim's wife answered. Man is clever. Bake a piece of bread for every night he sleeps. Then Utnapishtim touched Gilgamesh, who woke up and denied that he had fallen asleep. Look here, count the pieces of bread, then you'll know how many days you were asleep. Then he showed Gilgamesh the 7 pieces of bread. The first was dry, the 7th was freshly baked. I actually tried to recreate Utnapishtim's wife's bread for my upcoming cookbook, Table of Gods, by using ingredients that were available in Uruk 5,000 years ago. If you want to try making this linseed bread, go to tableofgods.com/wifebread. Gilgamesh was heartbroken. He just lost his chance to become immortal. What can I do, Utnapishtim? Everywhere I look, death stares at me. Let me reveal a secret, Gilgamesh. There is a plant with thorns in the great sea. If you can catch this plant, you will be young again. Gilgamesh didn't hesitate. He tied stones to his feet, took a deep breath, and sank to the bottom and found the plant. Then he removed the stones and floated up again. For the first time since Enkidu died, Gilgamesh felt happiness. Urshunabi! Urshunabi! This plant can cure all troubles. I shall call it Old Becomes Young. Urshunabi set course to Uruk. Gilgamesh's plan was to let an old man eat the plant first so that he could see that it worked before he ate it himself. But before they arrived, Gilgamesh wanted to freshen up, so he left Old Becomes Young under his supervision and bathed in a small woodland lake. Then all of a sudden, a snake came by and ate the plant. The snake shed its skin and disappeared. Gilgamesh cried in despair. he took hold of Urshunabi and said, "For whom have I tired my hand? For whom have I shed my heart's blood?" When Gilgamesh returned to Uruk, he saw a city with new eyes. He noticed the great walls that he had been blinded to see before. Gilgamesh asked the god of wisdom, Ea, if he could bring Enkidu up to earth just one last time. So Ea opened a hole to the underworld and let Enkidu's spirit rise. Gilgamesh didn't believe his eyes. He embraced and kissed his beloved friend. Tell me, my friend, tell me about the underworld." "I cannot tell you, my friend. If I were to tell you about the underworld as I've seen it, you would fall down and cry." "Then I will fall down and cry." Enkidu sighed. The spirits of the dead have different destinies in the underworld. Some have a good existence, others live in misery. Those who have left mourners behind are those who live a good life as spirits. With that said, Enkidu went down to the underworld again. It was the last time the two friends saw each other on earth. Today, they likely live together as spirits in the underworld. A few days ago, I told my 4-year-old son, Sargon, the Epic of Gilgamesh as a bedtime story. Sargon listened intensely, with his eyes wide open. Then Sargon asks if I can retell the story and change it so that Gilgamesh gets the plant. I said no, I can't do that, because that's not how the story unfolds. Then Sargon started to cry, as 4-year-olds do when they don't get what they want, and I just simply had to retell it or he would never go to sleep. So retold it and told him that Gilgamesh got the plant, and then Sargon fell asleep. Even 4-year-olds can conceive the concept of death. And I think it's interesting that it's so intrinsic to humans that we don't want to die. As a matter of fact, we live our lives as if we had endless of time. But if you count how many weeks you have left until you die statistically, or until you're too old to live life fully, you'd be surprised at the number. Think about that for a moment, and think about Enkidu's last words to Gilgamesh. And ask yourself, who will mourn when you die? Or maybe more importantly, what will they say about you?